you've got to have the local people that are involved in the local community. Your store managers, your department managers, and just all your people there in general, they've got to be involved in that. I've always dreamed of, tractors and equipment, although I do like tractors and equipment, but because of the people that I got to work with every day.
Technology is reshaping the equipment dealership's world. The leaders who see it are setting the pace. I'm Remi and Shawn, CEO and founder of Brilliant Harvest, an AI-powered help desk designed to strengthen the dealership-customer relationship. Built on Iron is a place where we explore how the most innovative leadership teams are adapting to new technologies and ideas. Every episode, I sit down with a dealership leader who's navigating real challenges, staffing pressures, rising customer expectations, and the technology that's starting to change how all of it works. These conversations are about more than technology and tools. They're about building something that lasts. Thanks for joining the conversation. Let's dive in. Today, joining me is Shawn Skaggs, the CEO of Parallel Ag. Parallel Ag is the leading ag co dealership. They were recently formed by a merger between Livingston Machinery and the Ag Solutions Group. They tagged on AC McCartney for good measure, and they now are spanning the Southern Plains to the Midwest with 17 locations and over 300 employees. I want to welcome Shawn for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Remi. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so, I kind of like to kick things off with a bit of an easy icebreaker, Shawn. And, you've been on quite a few podcasts. You've written a book, and you used to have a blog post. I don't think it's active, Business in a Hurry. But you don't have a LinkedIn profile. And what made me curious about kind of your approach to social media and business and your kind of view of that.
So, to be honest with you, I go back and forth on what my view of social media and business actually is. It's difficult. I'm going to say that I'm not on social media for selfish reasons as much as anything. I think it's probably a good thing to be on social media from a business standpoint, just to let people know who you are, kind of helps potential customers to build some trust in you and those kind of things. I think all that is good. But just me as a person, one thing that I figured out is that with my personality, to be honest with you, one of the things that I want for people to like me. And so I had, with my personality, I'd noticed that whenever I was posting things on social media, I was paying way too much attention to, how many likes did that get? How, did that take off? Was it popular? Did people not like it? I was worried about those things way too much. And so I just figured out that for me as a person, and then in addition to that, obviously, there's a lot of, just negativity that can come in through social media as well, whether and sometimes from places that you didn't expect. And so I figured out that for me to be the person that I want to be, I probably needed to be off of social media. And so back in and I've went through a couple phases of this, but the last time I went off social media, I think was 2016, and I've stayed off since then. And so before that, I was on a lot of social media, and I've actually had a couple of different blogs over the years, just depending on what I was interested in at the time. I had a theology blog way back in the day, and then, eventually that business blog, and enjoy writing and enjoy putting that stuff out there. But again, I got way too worried about whether or not it was popular, whether other people liked it, those kind of things. And so I ended up taking all that stuff kind of down, because what I really needed to do was, get heads down and focus on the business and focus on the people around me and what I could really, influence locally, rather than being worried about, whether, a bunch of people who I didn't know liked something that I wrote.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So 2016, that's when you first became CEO, if I have my dates right? And
that's correct.
So when you kind of think back to your journey to becoming CEO, I mean, did you know that you wanted to be the CEO of a dealership, or like, when did you know that you were the right person for this job?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I always knew that I wanted to be the CEO of an equipment dealership. I mean, just being completely honest with you, I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a farm, always wanted to be in agriculture, loved being a part of agriculture because I love the people, right? I love the people that are in agriculture. It's what I grew up with. It's what I know. And just, there are so many great people that we get to work with, in this industry, and our farmer customers are, such great people. And so that's what I really love about it. But I stumbled into the equipment business kind of by accident. I graduated from college with an animal science degree and went out right away and got a job with Cargill in their animal nutrition division and was working in East Texas for a year. And then I decided that I'd probably moved a little too far away from family and friends and I wanted to get back to closer to home. And so started kind of looking around a little bit and just got a call out of the blue one day from a friend of mine that I had shown steers with his kids whenever I was in high school and said, hey, we had somebody who just quit and they were going to manage a co-op. And so would you be interested in, taking a walk-in sales position here? And this was at Livingston Machinery Company. I was like, well, I don't know. I have no idea what that would entail, but, I'll come and talk to you at least. And so I went in and ended up talking to Earl Livingston for about 30 minutes on one Saturday morning. And next thing I knew, I was working at Livingston Machinery, and that was 25 years ago, and just been there ever since and stayed with it, not necessarily because, I've always dreamed of, tractors and equipment, although I do like tractors and equipment. But because of the people that I got to work with every day, inside the business, the people I got to work with every day outside the business, the partners that we have, I've just really enjoyed the people in the industry. And so that's what I really wanted to stay a part of. But as far as management, to be honest with you, the first couple of times that Earl asked me if I wanted to be even a store manager, I told him no. I said no. He would say, are you ready to manage this store yet? And I'd be like, no, I really don't want anything to do with that because it just seemed like a headache, and which, in a lot of cases it is. But eventually I decided that I could be a better value to the company and be more of a, have more of an influence on things and help more people basically, if I would go ahead and step into kind of that leadership role. And so that was what I eventually did, was stepped into a store manager leadership role, and then, went with that for a little while, but just kept seeing more things that needed to be done and started, taking on more and more responsibility outside of just that general manager role. And then eventually I was like, I guess all this stuff needs to be done, and I'm the one who sees that it needs to be done, or I'm the one who cares about that stuff, I guess, enough to go make it happen. And so just then I started realizing, I do want to kind of run this whole thing if I can. And was very fortunate that I had a lot of good role models and a lot of people who helped me along the way, who were able to groom me into somebody who could do that, I guess.
Okay, very cool. And, I continue to have discussions with my kids who are, 16, 18, 20 about what they want to do in their careers. And I keep telling them a lot of life is just kind of random collision and putting yourself out there and, ending up with your kind of in the industry and in the career path you did, based upon showing steers is a good example of that. Right. And it's just meeting people, right, and building relationships. So that's really cool. And, you've had a pretty tremendous opportunity, in your career to do something a lot of people haven't done, which is, you took two pretty good sized businesses and brought them together into, one entity, which is what became Parallel Ag. That was 3 years ago now, the formation of Parallel Ag. What, kind of on that people thread, what's been the hardest part of blending, I'm sure, two unique kind of operational cultures that you brought together? Like, how's that been? Kind of any learnings from that journey?
Oh, there's been a lot of learnings from that journey, Rami. Some of them, we had to learn the hard way by banging our head against the wall for a little while before we started to figure things out. And some of it, we were fortunate enough that we had some good people to help us with some of those learnings along the way. Whenever we brought together Ag Solutions Group and Livingston Machinery Company, there was a lot of just, I guess you would say, confusion, or not necessarily confusion, but just a lot of unanswered questions and uncertainty around, how are we going to do things? Are we going to do things the Livingston Machinery way or the Ag Solutions Group way? And, the naming thing was another big part of that. The reason we wanted to come up with a different name was to try and say, hey, it doesn't really matter how we did things here or how we did things there. We've got to do things going forward the way that it works for all of us to work together. And, that's one of the reasons why we came up with a new name for the business at that point, was because we didn't want it to be, I feel like a takeover. But the other thing that I have learned along the way is that at some point somebody has to say, no, this is the way we're going to do it. And it may be right and it may be wrong, but we've got to make a decision and go forward too. And so, you can also get caught in that trap of, I guess you would just say, people not knowing which way to do it or trying to do it two different ways, somebody's got to come in at some point and say, this is it. We're going to do it this way only. Whenever you get in some of those situations, sometimes people don't know which way to go because they don't know if they should do it the old way, the new way, or you certainly don't want them to do it in two different ways because that causes all kinds of downstream problems that people don't necessarily think about from an accounting standpoint or just other processes that it affects. And so at some point, somebody's got to come in and say, we're going to do it this way and we're going to try it this way and see if it works. And everybody's got to do it that way, whether it's the way you've always done it or not. And that's the big challenge, I think, with people in general and with business and cultures is we get into a rut and we want to say, this is the way we've always done it. So this is how we're going to do it because it's worked in the past. Right. And so it's only natural that if it's worked in the past, it must be the best way to do it. But sometimes we haven't thought about the new perspective of now we've got a larger organization. Now we've got more people that are involved. Now what we do affects other things that it didn't affect before. And so now we've got to rethink all those processes. And so that's a really hard process to go through is to kind of rethink all that and get everybody on board with this is why we're going to make this change. That's the big challenge. One of the best things that we did, though, whenever we started that new organization is we brought everybody together in a room from the leadership team. So we brought in all of our GMs from the Ag Solutions Group, all of our GMs from Livingston Machinery Company, all of the existing leadership teams, and we just put them all together in a room and we brought in a facilitator because I knew that I was going to, originally I thought I would try and lead that meeting, but I was like, no, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I'm not going to be able to think and react and answer questions in the way that I want to if I'm also trying to facilitate. And so we hired a facilitator to come in and facilitate that meeting for us. And she did a fantastic job. And we just got everybody together in a room so that we could talk about all the things everybody was concerned about. And we could work our way through those things. And she did a good job of facilitating that. And then also recognizing at one point, okay, we've got all the Ag Solutions Group guys over on this side. And we've got all the Livingston Machinery crew over on this side. And they're all just staring at each other like they're aliens. And they're not aliens. And so we, she and I talked and we're like, let's mix these people up. Let's force them to go sit in a place where they wouldn't normally sit and talk to people they wouldn't normally talk to. And let's make this happen. And that was actually a good move too, because people did get kind of forced to interact with each other. And by the end of that meeting, it was about a 2-day long meeting that we had there. They realized these guys are just like me. They want to go serve customers just like me. They want to do a good job just like me. We all had the same end goal, and that really helped everybody to realize, okay, we can make this work. And so, that was one of the biggest things on it was just getting everybody in a room together and just talking through all those things that everybody's concerned about.
And, you're over 300 employees.
Actually, we're not anymore. We're around 255 right now.
Okay, 255 across 7 states.
Across 7 states, that's correct.
Okay, so how with that kind of mixing of people and stuff, and new processes for everyone. Like, how do you keep that kind of small town dealer trust alive, right? Like when you think equipment dealerships are in a community and local farmers that work with that dealer, there's longstanding relationships. And as a big organization, how have you kept that intact?
Well, I mean, that's a big challenge. And I would say that there's some cases where we've done a good job of that. And there's some cases where we probably could have done a better job of that. But one of the main things is you've got to have the local people that are involved in the local community. Your store managers, your department managers, and just all your people there in general, they've got to be involved in that community. If everybody who's coming into your dealership lives 30 minutes away and they're all driving into work every day and they don't really know the people in the community, they're not at school activities, they're not at church activities, they're not at all the different things that happen inside those communities where people just really get to know and trust each other, then it's really hard to make it work. And so that's one of the main things is just staying involved in the community. I mean, we've got a ton of stores that one of the things they look forward to is they decorate a tractor every year and they're a part of the Christmas parade, right? And so everybody gets a chance to go and work on that together, go be a part of the community, throw candy out to the kids, and everybody knows, they're waiting for the big Fendt tractor to come by. That's because they're going to throw off this kind of candy. And that just being a part of the community is it takes effort and it's hard to do. And so that's the other thing that, that's really hard about just greenfield stores in general is you're trying to bring in, new people to a new area and you don't know anybody. And you've got to have somebody who's really willing to dive off and become a part of the Chamber of Commerce and become a part of, the local church or the local country club or whatever it is that everybody belongs to there, somebody's got to go and be willing to really become a part of that community.
Yep. Yep. It is a tricky balance, but so important, right? I mean, it's yeah, agree with what you're saying there. So maybe just switching gears a little bit. Parallel has quite a few different brands that you guys sell and support, right? And how do you manage, I think, am I correct, over 40 different brands, somewhere around there? There's
Oh,
probably
I
some
don't even know
priority
at this
to
point.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how many, but it's a lot.
So one of the things I've been curious about is, I mean, how do you manage all the parts and service and knowledge across all those different brands? Like, how does your team keep a handle on all that?
Well, the biggest thing is hire a lot of really good people. I mean, that's what every business comes down to, right? Is hire a lot of really good people, hire the best people that you can, and we've got some really great teams that do a good job of that. And we are fortunate enough that it's not like every single location has every one of those brands. We've got some locations that are very focused on Agco brands plus a handful of other short lines. We've got some locations that are, focused almost completely on short lines, but a lot of those short lines, we've only got at one or two locations. And so they're still able to kind of narrow their focus down to those things. But we've got to be able to give those people enough autonomy that they can manage that relationship and manage that particular part of the business themselves, because for one person to try and manage all that across there would be impossible. And so you've got to have some good teams. You got to make sure that those teams really understand what the strategy is and what our long-term goals are, so that they can make good decisions there at the local level. Because if they don't have that kind of transparency, then they're not going to have the ability to make the right decisions in all those cases. And so because we have to be, I'm trying to think of what the right term is for it, but because we have to basically disseminate so much authority and leadership, we've just got to make sure that all those people that are in those roles really understand what we're trying to do and how we want to take care of customers.
And have you found, the last few years, and 26 probably isn't too different, tighter on new equipment sales in general in the market, right? Across, North America anyways, is having kind of specialized equipment like that, helped the bottom line? Are those, margin builders for the business?
It's very variable, I would say. You've got a few of them that are definitely margin builders for the business, and you've also got some of them that, as the industry goes up and down, they go up and down wildly, right? Because some of those short lines are very essential to people's businesses, but some of those short lines are not necessarily as essential as some of their mainline stuff, right? So a tractor, something that is going to be primary to every farmer's business, regardless of when they're doing or what kind of business they're doing. That tractor's essential in everything that they do. But some of the other, I guess, short line products that we sell aren't necessarily essential all the time. And it's certainly not essential that they, rotate that machine out, that they roll that machine every year or every 2 years or even every 5 years. Sometimes they're used so little that they can get by with buying a new one every 10 years. And so they become low priority, both from a replacement standpoint, but also become honestly a low priority from a maintenance standpoint in some cases. And so, it's just very variable. There's some of those short lines that, whenever we get into times like this, you're really glad you've got, and there's some of those short lines that when you get into times like this and you're like, I don't know, should we cut that line? Because it's just not making sense right now. It costs more to maintain that than we're ever going to make in the next 2 or 3 years. And so that's something we're constantly evaluating and trying to make sure that we're making good decisions on. But at the same time, we can't abandon the customers that have already got those machines that are out there. And so that's the main consideration that we try and think about whenever we decide what we're going to do. And so if we ever do end up cutting one of those lines, then we try and find actually a replacement dealer. We try and find somebody else in town who can take over that line and, help that manufacturer out with that, because we don't want to leave a customer stranded.
Yeah, that makes sense. This tight market has really shifted. Lots of discussions, going to conferences, stuff like around absorption. That's, really surviving on the service revenue. And has it changed what's in your service bay? If you think of the equipment that was in your service bay 3 years ago or so to today, is it older equipment that you're repairing more of, or is it the same? Like, what are you kind of seeing there?
Oh, there's definitely been a shift over the last 2 or 3 years. People's replacement cycles have definitely changed. There's a lot of farmers that were in some really fast turnover replacement cycles where they were trading machines, depending on what kind of machine it was, but every 2 years, every 3 years, or some of them every single year, that have shifted now. If it was every year before, now it might be every 2 to 3 years. And if it was every 2 to 3 years before, now it might be every 5 to 7 years. You know, the big thing that I feel like our farmers are trying to balance all the time is they want reliability, but at the same time they've got to balance that out with cost. And we've all been hit with so much cost increase through inflation. And then whenever you compile, we've got all these inflationary prices on new machines with the fact that the values dropped dramatically on used machines. Well, now they've got a huge price gap in there. And so they've got to try and make a decision about, do I want a machine that I know is going to be really reliable and is still in warranty so I don't have that cash flow risk if something goes wrong? Or do I want to, keep my costs lower so it's easier to make all my payments at the bank and everywhere else? And that's a tough decision to make. That's a really tough position that a lot of farmers are in right now, is trying to figure out, how do I balance that out? How do I make sure that, I'm not taking too much risk from either a financial perspective or from a downtime perspective, because downtime can be just as destructive to them as, taking more financial risk. And so it's tough for everybody. These times just aren't fun all the way around, and all we can do is just try and provide the best services that we can. And then also, it's one of the things we've been focused on lately, is trying to figure out more ways that we can help farmers to manage that risk, whether that's through extended warranty programs or service programs that we can build into a payment, just all the different things that we can do to try and help eliminate a customer having to come out of pocket with an extra $30, $40, $50,000 because there was an engine failure or a transmission failure or something like that.
Yep. And I mean, the underpinning theme there is certainly service. We have a major movement of retiring people, right? Baby boomers are retiring. Mm-hmm. It's probably a significant chunk of both your customer base, but also your team, right? And so how are you tackling, one, retaining the knowledge of those individuals before they walk out the door, if they're a 30-year veteran, been in, know all those different brands of equipment and have serviced them all? How do you maintain that knowledge? How do you help transfer it to, the 22-year-old that walks in the door? And how are you thinking about that pipeline of people to make sure that you've got those really good people that you talked about earlier?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of things. We're realizing more and more that we've got to do a lot more internal training than what we've done in the past to try and keep people up to speed. Before, I was guilty of making the assumption that because we hired this young person and we put them alongside this person who has lots of experience and does a great job with customer service, that I could take some 23 or 24-year-old person and put them alongside them and have them work together every day. And I assumed that it would rub off, right? Like the person who was really great at customer service and had all this knowledge, that they would just naturally start teaching that younger person. That is not what happens. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not. And so we've got to be intentional about making sure that we transfer that knowledge. We've got to be intentional about making sure that we train everybody on, this is what good customer service actually looks like, because we weren't intentional enough about it in the past. And so we've just recently started really making that shift. And then the other thing is, you guys are helping us with this as well at Brilliant Harvest. With the Parallel Ag Fix app is going to be one of the ways that I think is going to be really helpful to us as we onboard new technicians and new parts people both, because they don't have a lot of that institutional knowledge, a lot of that experience that our folks who are getting close to retirement age have. And we're trying to capture as much of their knowledge as possible. But it's really hard to do, and it's especially been hard to do before we had tools like what we've got now. But with the Parallel Ag Fix app that you guys have built for us, collecting all that work order data as well as manual data and things like that, I think that's going to be really helpful in passing on some of that knowledge to the younger generation that comes in that doesn't have the experience. But if they can at least get some help from, the AI tool, from, easy access to those manuals and those work orders, they're going to be able to pick up a lot of that knowledge as they go through there that we probably wouldn't have ever even thought to try and pass down, right? Because we hadn't run into that particular issue, but once every 3 or 4 years. And so you don't think about, I've got to train them on, what happens whenever this particular error code goes off, because it doesn't happen very often. But if we've captured that before in a previous work order, and then now we can show that to that new person, then that's one thing that will definitely help to pass on that knowledge, I think. But we've got to find more ways to do that, because it is definitely a challenge, and our culture has changed over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And so, we've got some differences. I'm not going to say they're generational differences, because they're not. Everybody's DNA is the same whenever they're born, right? I think every generation goes through this phase where they're like, well, but the young kids today, they just don't want to work like we did. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. But it's not really generational. It's really cultural. And we're the ones who created that culture. And so there's nobody to blame except for us. But the culture does change over time. And so we've got to figure out ways that we can adapt to the culture, but also create our own culture internally that's built around a certain kind of work ethic, that's built around a certain kind of commitment to our customers. And that's not something that they're going to walk in the door ingrained with. And so we've got to figure out ways to ingrain that in them.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, this is a tough question, but I'm curious your thoughts on it. Is the dealership of the future, is it the one with the best iron, like the best equipment, or is it the one with the best service that can support the customer? Who wins? Like, which is the future dealer?
I'm a big believer that it's the one with the best customer service, the best customer experience, that's really willing to go the extra mile to support the customer. Because, we've got great equipment, but there's a lot of other dealers out there that have great equipment too. And so at the end of the day, in my book, I feel like most of the people that do business with us, there are definitely some that are brand loyal, and I don't want to discount that. And we have the opportunity to serve some great brands, but I feel like most of our customers at the end of the day, they do business with us because of the way that we support them. It's not because of a certain color of iron that we've got. I think it's because of the way that we support them. And so we can't forget that. And we've got to continue to provide that exceptional customer experience for them if we want to keep that business, because if we don't, someone else will.
Yeah. And I find interesting is that in this age of technology, things moving faster than ever before, it still comes down to the human relationship, and it's so foundational, right? And I think people do lose sight of that, quickly. They think it's about these other things. And so maybe just shifting, let's maybe talk about technology for a moment. And, where does, has Parallel Ag looked at robotics, autonomous farm equipment, outside of the major brands? Like, there's a whole bunch of other kind of new technology companies that are, selling different autonomous stuff. Do you guys look at that? Do you test those stuff, different equipment out? How do you think about that?
So that's one thing that I think we'd like to do more of, but I can't say that, that we've done a ton of work with, autonomous equipment and those kind of things. We've got some really good precision ag professionals right now that they want to engage in more of those types of things, but we haven't really pushed that because we've been honestly probably too reactive, I would say, on the precision side historically, just us as an organization. And we're there to support those customers and do those kind of things, but we're not proactive enough in going out and promoting some of the new technology out there and how that can provide ROI for our customer. And that's one of the things that we want to shift towards. And so, we're undergoing a little bit of a shift inside of our precision organization right now, bringing in some new leadership to try and help with that and really get us focused on being proactive for customers. But it's something that we're going to have to really address because, obviously, technology is changing super fast. It's always changed really fast, I feel like, inside of agriculture, but now it's changing really fast everywhere. And as that technology changes, people are realizing more and more opportunities out there. And if you can show that there's real ROI with, some of these different autonomous vehicles, or some of the other autonomous operations that they've created out there, I think I saw another one, I can't remember who it was from, on, autonomous grain bagging the other day I got an email about. And so it's just all these different ways that they can make some of these systems and processes autonomous for farmers. We've got to get really good at that, because if that's something that can provide ROI for that farmer, we need to be knowledgeable about it. We need to be their go-to person for it and be able to help them with it. And so that's one of the things we're going to be working towards. But I can't say that we're honestly there today. Right now, we're, like I said, we've been in a little bit of a reactive mode, and that's probably my fault as much as anybody's. But we're working towards becoming a lot more proactive in that.
So you're personally an adopter of AI tools, right? You use them, in your personal life and at work. Tell us a bit about the cool stuff you've been building. Nothing confidential, of course. And what tools are you personally using? AI tools have you been working with?
It's been an interesting journey on the whole AI thing, because I'll be honest with you, I'm naturally an early adopter. I always have been. I've always loved technology. In college, I had an opportunity to buy a computer or build a computer, and I was like, well, why wouldn't I just build my own computer? And so I just started building computers, and then I started building computers for my family and everybody else, because they could either buy this $2,000 computer or I can build you one for $250. Which one would you rather do? Okay, I'll build you one for $250. And so that's what I started doing right out of the gate. And so I've always loved that kind of stuff. But honestly, with the AI stuff, from what I had seen, and I wasn't, super involved in it because I was very involved in our business, and that was where my focus was at. But some of the AI tools that had been presented to us, up until really just a year or so ago, I'd kind of looked at them and been like, yeah, that's a fancy search engine. That's not really something that's going to be a game changer for our people. We need something that's going to be more than just a fancy search engine. And about a year ago, we started to realize, there's more capabilities out there than this. This can be a lot more than just a fancy search engine. This can be a real tool that really helps to diagnose machines, on the service side. And so that's when we started diving into that. And then, personally, what kind of forced me into it was, I had lost my my personal assistant. I had an assistant an executive assistant that I had worked with for several years, and then got to the point where I didn't have that executive assistant. And, with the business being where it was at, honestly, I just didn't want to add that expense again. And so I was like, maybe there's some AI tools that can help me with that, and started digging into that. Well, then that just opened Pandora's box for me, because I got way too involved and way too excited about all of it probably, and started really digging into it, and just started out with, a simple tool like ChatGPT, and using it to kind of, ask questions and be a thought partner. Read a really good book, and I'm guilty of not being able to remember the author's name right now, but I think it was called, oh gosh, I'm going blank. But it was a good book on just basically on using AI as a thought partner and using it in the business, not letting it, lead, but using it as a tool to be able to help your team and help increase productivity. And that was really helpful for me to understand how to use those AI tools better. And then once I just started diving into it, there's just so much happening. You can go down a rabbit hole and not come out for a year if you didn't want to, because there's so many different things happening in the AI space right now. But yeah, I started out with ChatGPT and just seeing kind of what it could do. And then I found Perplexity, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. That can do, a few more things. And then especially at that time, they had the Perplexity Labs, which was basically just their specialized agent that would build things for you. And so I thought that's really handy. I can just build a dashboard if I need a dashboard. I can just tell it what I want, and it would start building it. And so that was cool. And then discovered Manus, which was an even more specialized agent, which is still honestly one of the most capable tools I've ever been around. And still use it to this day to build some things. And we've built our own, service scheduling app that we're in the process of integrating with IntelliDealer right now, using Manus as kind of our primary building tool. And then that's the other thing that I've learned along the way, is that you don't know what you don't know. And so you better start digging into what you don't know, because there's, if you don't pay attention there, you can create all kinds of security problems and, other problems for yourself down the road. And so you better do a lot of research on that. And luckily now it's getting a little bit easier. There's a lot of places that you can, pull down skills, and being able to add certain skills to some of these agents has been really helpful in making it easier to verify that you've done things in the right way and got some of this security stuff handled. But also, you still got to do a lot of research and find out what are all the different places that I could create a problem here if I don't pay attention to this. And so that's been a part of it. But man, it's been a big learning journey, and I'm a learning junkie. I love to learn. I love to read books. I love to just constantly, see what else I can find out. And there's been you can do it for years and years with all the stuff that they've got out there in AI right now. So, using some of those tools, I've recently really gotten into Claude and using Claude Code, finally, took the dive a few months ago to start playing with some AI in the terminal, which is probably beyond what anybody on this podcast wants to hear about. But yeah, then that opened up all kinds of new doors for things that we could do. And yeah, it's a constant journey. And there's so many things changing so fast and so many new tools coming out. I don't want to say that this is the best tool or that's the best tool, because it's going to change tomorrow, right? It's an arms race out there for who can come up with what kind of tools. And but being at least aware of what's out there and what it can help you with, I think it can be really helpful inside the business. But you can also go too far down a rabbit hole and start doing things for the sake of doing it with AI. And I think that's definitely a mistake too. It's got to be, how can this improve our process? How can this improve our workflow? And if it can't do those two things, then it's probably not worth pursuing.
And so you're building some tools. You're also, as you mentioned, a great customer of Brilliant Harvest. I'm curious, how do you make a decision? Build versus buy. Partner, so to speak. What's that thought process for you?
So if it's something that I think is simple enough that I can build it and not, I guess I'm trying to not paint myself into a corner, not that I can maintain it. And then also if it's simple enough that it's not going to put like a customer's uptime or downtime at risk, right? So if that, like for something as serious as the Parallel Ag Fix app that you guys have built for us, that's something where I don't want to take any chances of there being any mistakes. You guys do this for a living. You're doing it all day, every day. You're not a hobbyist like I am. And so I know that you're very focused on building exactly the right app. You're not just doing it with us. You're doing it with multiple companies out there, multiple other dealerships that are trying to accomplish the same thing we are. And so you're going to have all that experience and all of their experience to be able to build the right tool. So in those cases, it makes more sense to go outside, to go third party, in my opinion, for sure. If it's going to be that mission critical, then third party is probably the way to go to get somebody who's focused on it all day, every day. Now, if it's something that's not super mission critical, but maybe it can help the workflow for somebody inside the business, then yeah, I may jump on that and tackle it if I feel like it's something that I can handle. But if it's something that's just way beyond my means, then no, it probably doesn't make sense. But I do think we're coming into an age where there are a lot more little mini apps that you can build inside of a business that are really helpful. We built one day, I was playing around with Notebook LM because that's a big tool that we use a lot around here, just because it makes it so much faster to learn. And it also is just really helpful to get information disseminated, like creating training and things like that. We use Notebook LM for a lot of training creation. And then but it was creating these great slides, but the videos honestly lacked a little bit. And so I was like, how can I take these slides and make them into a really good video? And so I built a tool that I could upload the slides into, and it would turn all those slides into basically pictures again. And then it would incorporate a voiceover over the top of that, and you could go in and edit it slide by slide, and it would just make its own video like a Notebook LM video, but with much better slides than what Notebook LM did. And so that was something that we've used a few times, for some advertising stuff and some training stuff, and little tools like that, where it's not necessarily mission critical, but it can make your workflow better or it can improve the quality of your training. Then I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah. Is the future for Parallel Ag a further expansion, more stores, or if you had to pick one, more stores or going deeper, with your existing stores, which path are you taking? What's kind of the next 5 years, let's say 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think there's opportunity, going both ways. I do feel like we've got a lot of work to do on going deeper in the stores that we have right now. And everybody probably feels like that right now because we're in a down market, and it's just, you start to really see all the places where you have room for improvement whenever you get into a market like this. Every little thing that you would have just glanced right over, 3 or 4 years ago in a really up market, now it becomes really critical, and you start to really focus in on how do we change this? How do we make this better? And so I feel like we've got room to go deeper with the stores that we have, and that's going to be our primary focus, for the next few years. But there's no doubt that there will be a time whenever we feel like, okay, we've got this under control. it's okay to go and expand again and start to look at adding some more stores. So I think we will eventually add more stores, but for the next couple of years, our focus is going to be how do we get really good with the stores that we have.
Okay. So this has been a great discussion, Shawn. I like to close out with some rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
I'm going to hit you with 3 quick ones. So just whatever comes kind of top of mind. So what's one piece of equipment that you think is underrated right now?
Ooh, good question. A piece of equipment that's underrated. You know, this is an old piece of equipment that I think is really underrated right now, but I see it because of the industry that we're in and that I've always been focused on. Small square balers right now. We are in a market where, hay prices are not great through most of the Western United States. And I've actually created I use Perplexity to help me do this, but created a calculator and a landing page for people to go on and put in their own information, and they can see whether it's more profitable for them to run a round baler or a large square baler or a small square baler. And just based on that, moving to that one package size. And now we've got additional tools that you can add, like we sold the bell bearings to go behind the small square balers to be able to package it up into a large square bale so it's easier to handle and easier to store. But buying that, which is a lot more expensive machine than a round baler, but it still ends up being like 350% more profitable to do that than to put it up in round bales or square bale or big square bales. If you're selling the hay, if you're not just feeding it yourself. And so that, to me, that's the number one most underrated tool for anybody that's a hay producer right now. If you're still putting everything up in round bales and you're not making small square bales, I don't know what you're doing. You're leaving money on the table.
Okay. What is your favorite business podcast that you often listen to?
Oh, my favorite business podcast is Easily Acquired. I don't know if you've ever listened to Acquired, but that is a great one. Those guys do a great job of telling the story of businesses. And I feel like I learned so much by listening to them talk about the process of building those businesses and the strategies that were used. I really love Acquired. I can't recommend that one enough.
Yeah, I listened to it as well. Great podcast. There was one on about kind of AI, the history of AI related to kind of fed into
the Google podcast, probably.
Yeah.
Yes,
Really,
that's a great one.
Really good.
And there's more to come on that too, I think.
Yeah, I would assume so for sure. Okay, last question. So, what is your kind of advice to a single store dealer principal in this kind of tough market today? What should they be doing, or what guidance would you give them?
In this kind of market, it really doesn't matter whether you're a single store or multi-store dealer. My advice is going to be the same, is get really focused on cash flow. Make good decisions around cash and around inventory, because that's where most of your cash gets tied up, and you can survive this. And sometimes people get really wrapped up with making good profit on paper, but that doesn't necessarily pay the bills, because you can show to be really profitable on paper without having nearly enough cash flow to actually pay the bills and make the business work. You can operate for a long time being unprofitable but having cash, but you can't operate anytime being profitable but not having cash. So just get really focused on cash flow and really focused on inventory management. That's what I would say.
Okay. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Shawn. And you can check out Parallel Ag at parallelag.com. And want to really thank you for taking the time today, Shawn. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Remi. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to Built on Iron. If today's conversation has you thinking about what's possible in your dealership, we've put together a free report, The Equipment Dealer's Guide to Creating an AI-Powered Customer Experience, to help you take it to the next level. Head to brilliantpowered.com or check out the link in the show notes for this episode. We'll be back soon with more stories from innovative leaders who are changing the way the industry works.